So I wanted to take some time to explain my social difficulties, specifically in regards to large groups and things like parties and work dinners and stuff like that, and why I find those so difficult, specifically in regards to social anxiety and how that's not something that I am simply going to be able to work through because social anxiety is the simple way of explaining it to be able to just quickly get the idea across when really it is much more complicated than that. Unfortunately, it's not just anxiety. Truth be told, the majority of the anxiety that comes is in relation to the greater issue, and that's a sensory processing issue. You see, I find it incredibly difficult and the majority of the time basically impossible to filter. Whereas I feel like a lot of people can get into a one-on-one conversation with someone and just kind of tune out the world around them. I am not really capable of doing that. And I find that the older I get, the more difficult it is for me to do so. So, for instance, a few weeks ago I went out to a meal with some of my family. It's all people I know fairly well, and it wasn't a large group by any means, but there were, 7 or 8 of us, and at one point there were 3 different conversations going on, and my mind was sitting there trying to process all 3 conversations at the same time, and no matter how much I focused on the person that's trying to talk to me, my mind was wandering and I was trying to process everything, and it just got jumbled and overwhelming to the point that my mind was shutting down. And that's how it is so much of the time for me with large groups. The only times that I can really manage to not shut down like that is if I don't have to be social. For me, it's very much all or nothing. Like, if I'm not having to be social and I can just tune everything out, that's fine. I can tune everything out, I can block it out, whatever. But if I have to try to interact with even one person, then I'm opening the floodgates and just letting everything in. And the thing is that when I'm in situations like that, my brain just can't process anything and tries to process everything, and it just winds up getting overwhelmed and essentially overheating. It's like having a computer that is trying to run multiple different programs at once. And like, let's say you're trying to run a video game and you're trying to listen to music and you're trying to render a video. That video is an output that it's trying to provide, but it's gonna get messed up because the system can't handle everything. And so it's either going to fail to render completely, or it's going to come up with just gibberish and come up with a bad video. And that's really how my mind works. Like, overstimulation causes my mind to get overheated and just kind of shut down to the point that I can't process anything, and it becomes nearly impossible for me to create any sort of output, to come up with something to say, to be able to talk and interact. And then it is at that point that the anxiety starts to come in. And it really creates this vicious spiral, because when I get overwhelmed to the point that I can't think of things to say, and I'm unable to participate in the way that I want to, I start to become anxious. And the more anxious I become, the more sensitive I am to all of the noise and all of the things that I'm trying to process and failing to do so. So it makes it even worse, so that I can't talk as much, which then makes me even more anxious. And yeah, it just kind of becomes a spiral and just makes everything significantly worse. Now, I am aware of this, and I understand, at least to a fairly decent degree, how my mind functions. So even though I'm not able to overcome it, I am able to work with it. And I've learned a lot of different techniques to help mitigate the the overwhelming nature of it, but so much of that is things like stepping out of the situation. If uh, you know, quickly take a bathroom break or step outside for a little bit and just clear my head. Um, if I don't do that, then I will reach the point of panic attacks. But even if I do take those steps to help mitigate it and help kind of recover a little bit, it doesn't help me fully recover. It just kind of tempers it for a short time. And so with all of this, like the major issue comes in that I can't just go to, say, a company dinner, because if I was to go to a company dinner, then I am going to get overwhelmed by all of the conversations going on around me. And as much as I try, no matter what I do, I cannot simply relax and just enjoy it, because I get overwhelmed and I cannot process anything. And the same thing goes for birthday parties, for friends just having a gathering. Like, I don't like having my own birthday parties surrounded by people that I know and love, because that gets overwhelming for me. And that's not an anxiety thing. Yes, anxiety plays a part in it, but it's a result of the sensory processing disorder. Now, this is something that I've dealt with my entire life, but I've only really learned and understood about myself over the past couple of years. And this is very difficult for me, in that I feel like the way I'm wired and the way my brain functions, I can't simply enjoy life. I didn't go to the company Christmas dinner this past December. Um, I would have liked to go, but I knew that it would be very overwhelming and that I would not be able to just enjoy it. And so I ultimately chose to care about my mental health and not deal with the panic attacks that were going to result if I went. But then I'm stuck at home regretting that I didn't go, because I would have liked to go. So it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. Or like, you know, we bought this house last year and I would have loved to have a bunch of people over and have a housewarming party, but I know I can't handle that. And I kept wanting to have people over and kept wanting to do that, but ultimately I know I would be overwhelmed and I would not be able to enjoy it, and I would be counting the minutes until everybody left so that I could finally relax and recover from having friends over. And so it's because of that yeah, I had a bit of a mental breakdown, and because of that realization that I'm always going to be stuck in a point where I can't just enjoy certain aspects of life that are very common for most people, social gatherings, that this is kind of the reality I'm in, that I'm always going to get overwhelmed by these situations and it's always going to be difficult for me. And the older I get, the more difficult it becomes. I've kind of come to terms with it over the past month or so. Um, I mean, to a degree. Like, I wouldn't say that I'm happy about it by any means, but I've kind of reached a point where it's no longer like actively upsetting me. But since it is primarily like a sensory processing issue, it's not something that I can just work through. Exposure therapy doesn't work for this type of issue. If it was simply anxiety, then yeah, okay, put myself into more social situations so I can get more used to it and get better at it. But I'm not going to just get better at being overwhelmed. It doesn't matter how much I am exposed to too much noise, that too much noise and inability to process is still going to be what it is. And I think ultimately this is just my brain chemistry. This is how I am wired. it's part of being neurodivergent. Now, I'm sure there's a lot more that I could say. I didn't plan this out. I didn't write a script or anything, so this is all just off the top of my head. So I'm sure I could elaborate plenty more. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. It will not bother me at all. Try to help you understand to some degree what I experience, even if you're not going to be able to fully understand it, having not experienced it yourself. So, yeah, hopefully that helps to some degree for you to understand what it is that I struggle with when I don't like doing large social gatherings, when I don't want to have birthday parties for myself, when I don't want to, go to a church picnic, or uh, when a friend invites me over to their house for a Christmas party, why that's so difficult for me, and why I wind up leaving early because I'm getting just too overwhelmed and just need to escape. So yeah, hopefully that helps some, and thank you for listening.